any of this reaction. But
Sure.
they may not have had, they may not have been epileptic.
They probably weren't, but I think that's the big question, right? Is that like if an epileptic person plays something that's got flashing lights, they are probably going to have a seizure, and it's probably not the fault of the game.
No, probably not that.
But 25 years ago, they would probably.
Well, these things were not as well monitored is a wrong word, but well understood, and the technology wasn't good enough. I mean, I know personally, I've been in work environments that were kind of. High security would be a way to say it, and so your monitor was watched, and screen captures were remotely taken of your monitor.
Yeah.
And we had employees who said, "Listen, I have epilepsy. You can't take screen grabs of my screen because when they did, the screen capture would cause the monitor to do a little flash.
Yeah.
And that would be enough to set this person off, and so the company couldn't do it. So, I mean, I can see." If you're not used to it, this rule had been made until this one guy came along and said, hi, can't do that to me.
Right.
And so everybody's testing it, it's fine. And then, we didn't think about that.
But it still is a little strange because, what happens is the game is very popular. One kid has an epileptic seizure, which may or may not even be the fault of the game. And they're all like in panic mode and they pull all the machines. It's like, really?
I guess I think it makes sense to me, honestly. Even the scaremongering that happens with like current video games where people say like, oh, if you play this game that has guns in it, you're going to become a murderer, and that I think is kind of the same situation where you have this game that's out for a week and it's technology that people don't really understand, and some kid, whether he has epilepsy or not, has a seizure or has an adverse reaction to it. The technology is so new, people are just going to say that thing did it.
Right.
That it's that thing's fault.
There is always that possibility, although at the same time, I know when I was a kid, there were always kids that we knew were just spazzes. And so it's like, not credible.
But again, like everything else, it's peppered with doubt.
Well, one of the things I'm interested in finding out, and it didn't occur to me until now to actually check this out, is that have there ever been any video game manufacturers based in South America?
Surely.
I'm sure. I don't know that they weren't the manufacturer as far as I can tell. It sounded like they were, what was it? How did Roach put it? Let me grab this.
Yeah, well, it sounds like the Zinnerslastum was basically him and some friends who were programmers.
Right.
So it sounds like they developed some software, but it doesn't sound like it does not sound like they had the capability to actually produce hardware.
No, but again, if it's a South American company, it could have been some group that just said an investment group of some kind. So they went to some other country and said, I need you to make me this hardware. They went to another country and said, I need you to build this cabinet.
Yeah, perhaps.
It could have been just piecemealed out so that when it got time to do it, no two people that were involved in opposite sides knew the other.
Right.
I mean, that's how cells work.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's quite possible.
Yeah.
So Roach goes on to talk about, though, he says, okay, well, this whole thing about Men in Black, I can tell you who that was. That was all the execs and all the investors who were panicking and came flocking to the area to deal with this event, this seizure that this boy had, and to try to mitigate the impact of it. So now they're all hanging around the arcade, and they're all nervously staring at the machine and talking. Of course, everybody's like, what's that bunch of dudes doing?
Yeah.
So it could be as simple as a misinterpretation. They're staring, going, oh, God, don't play it. Why is that guy staring at the
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, if a kid had a seizure in an arcade, there's nothing that anybody could do to keep that out of the newspaper.
It's true.
And let's face it, this is kind of a slow moving town. So I mean,
at that time,
there it still is. It still
Billy
is.
had
It's
a
like,
seizure.
I mean, yeah.
Well, but they also, they were saying that like there was this massive fear mongering that happened, right? There was this massive scare that happened.
Well, but I wanna pull back on that because it may have been fear mongering amongst the company and the investors panicking.
That's fair.
Rather than the public.
That's fair. That's
so
totally
it's possible.
Yeah.
Well, and here's the other problem is that we can't find any record of this boy, but a settlement out of court was made evidently with his family. So there's going to be no lawsuit on record because they just did it under the table, essentially.
And I'm sure that they signed do not,
right, non-disclosure agreements. You have to when you do that.
Yeah, so they've never been able to talk about it.
Yeah, and it says that they were trying to, basically after that, he and his buddies, they disbanded the company they made because they just wanted to distance themselves from this whole thing. This thing just fell apart. It was terrible. And no, we don't want to keep making stuff and be haunted by this going forever.
Yeah, but the thing that I find less credible about this is he published his little thing in 2006. Mm-hmm. So the cultural difference between America in 2006 and 1981 is, number one, in 1981 we weren't such a litigious society. And that, in 1981 that was alive back in those days. I know that if for example, I was playing a video game and I had an epileptic seizure, my parents probably wouldn't think about suing the company that made it. They would just assume I had an epileptic fit. You probably wouldn't find a lawyer to take the case because, the lawyer would just say, the jury's going to laugh at you. Your kid has epilepsy.
Well, I guess...
So, through the lens of 2006 litigious America, this sort of panicking on the part of the company makes sense. But in 1981, it doesn't make sense.
I guess so. The counter to that is that, so for instance, my brother, who does not have epilepsy, has had 2 seizures in his life. Yeah. And, both of them were by outside sources, and that happens to people. So I think that, we've been saying it's an epileptic fit, well, maybe he just had a seizure. Maybe he, because some people that just happens every once in a while. You don't have epilepsy, but if this game if something has given
something has happened
something, so I think that
stimulus.
Even in the 80s, if your kid isn't sick and then suddenly they have something horrible happen to them, maybe they're not gonna go through we're gonna sue you for $1 million, but probably the company is gonna be listen, let's just deal with this right now.
No, maybe,
but I don't know.
Not.
It's hard to tell
because
situations like that.
Again, the kid is in an arcade, which has got dozens of other arcade machines in it, which he's obviously been playing. So any one of those. It could have been that he just had recently consumed just minutes before 36 popsicles or something like that. It could have been all kinds of things that caused a seizure.
That's Coca-Cola or something.
Yeah,
sure, and that's definitely possible. But I think if it's this startup, whatever. Nobody really knows what they're doing. They're experimenting with new visuals that people haven't really seen before. I think that the tendency for a company to panic is greater when they're kind of experimenting in this sort of situation. But, again, we're having exactly the debate that everybody's having online.
Well, again, I think again, actually, when it's not a startup, when they're a really big company, then they're typically seen as a deep pocket by attorneys. But when they're just a startup with not a lot of capital or anything like that, they're not really a worthy target because they don't have any money to take from.
True. True. Well, let's move farther into the information that we get from Steve Roach.
Oh yeah, more about Roach.
Okay.
So according to Roach, and his explanation is difficult, and I'm actually going to try and read this verbatim to describe this to everyone, but this is how he says the game was played. And again, personally, this game sounds lame. He describes it. But the game is centered around a moon base, which he says is largely plagiarized from Star Wars, which displayed a number.
That doesn't... What's that mean exactly?
I'm guessing there was a number in the middle of the moon base.
Oh, okay.
Okay, let's get farther in. I think this will help clarify a little bit more. So there are 6 sets of different aliens. The first, which varied through 6 levels, appears as random waves sent out from the moon base and need to be destroyed. The others were numbered between 1 and 10, which had to be repelled back to the base to lower the total. The figure you had to match exactly to clear the level, otherwise you lose 2 lives or just 1 if you have one remaining. So if I understand the way he's saying this correctly, the moon base, let's say, comes up with number 55. And a ship comes at you and it says 5. And you bounce it back into the base. sounded to me like you were trying to get the moon base to drop back down to 0 by pushing numbers back into it.
Like a mix between a shooter game and math game.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so that's how he says it. And he goes on to give out some more stuff, which makes the description even more convoluted and difficult to follow. And I just don't want to read it because it doesn't logically make sense to me.
Sure.
But what he does say is that the longer a specific level goes on, faster the game gets, which we've all seen in every video game that we've ever played.
Kind of all that way.
But as you go longer, the screen, the lights begin to flash, and if you beat the game, the screen rapidly flashes, puts up the word Polybius, and eventually says Polybius. So I'm guessing it probably is in that prototypical video, Polybius, that deep-throated, weird voice that they always had in old video games, which, if this kid beat the game and it's rapid flashing, could be what caused the seizure.
Well, yeah, I mean, that makes sense to me that they would have rapid flashing, right? You blew up the moon. It's the representation of the explosion of said moon.
Yeah, and
right?
let's face it, graphics weren't too sophisticated back in those days. So
it says Polybius. Based on that description, I can see how somebody could have a seizure from it. But I can also, it does kind of sound like a lame game, but I can also, when I was a kid and playing like Math Rabbit or whatever, like you get addicted to those things because, you just, in your mind, you just are competitive and you think, well, if I just play it again, maybe this time I'll do better. Well, and it just feeds on itself.
I played the crap out of Asteroids. I played the holy heck out of the Star Wars game.
Yeah.
That was a total vector base. To this day, if I see that game, I'll play it.
Oh, yeah.
I can't help myself. I gotta drop 50 cents in and play it.
Yeah, listen, there are games, this is how, there's that bar downtown called Ground Control, which is games there that, like, nobody ever wants to play, but I'm sitting there playing them, like, drunk, like, I've got a couple beers in me, I'm just, like, playing it, just shoving quarters in, and there's no reason for it except for that I can't pass them up.
Yeah.
Because you remember them.
Favorite games.
Yeah.
They're nostalgic.
So, by the way, do they have Asteroids there?
Yeah.
Probably.
Damn,
I
gotta go down there.
Yeah.
It's been a long time since I played Asteroids.
I mean, so it's one of those games that you think like empirically you're like, wow, it sounds boring, but then you like get into it and you're like, oh man,
this is so fun and so hard, but if you do this, it's really good. Yeah, I mean, it's completely plausible.
Yeah, and the thing that I always say about, like, again, I'm a little bit nerding out here, but like video games of the past versus video games of now, right? Video games of the past, you had to hate before you could love them. And I think that's a great thing to say about a game like this, where like you would hate this game, you would hate it, but you wouldn't want it to beat you. So you'd go back and play it and play it and play it, and I can see how people would just get
Or you'd
obsessed.
watch that one guy who was really good, somehow figured it out, and then you couldn't help but watch him play.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. So, I can see, just based on that description, that description's far more interesting to me than any of the other
things that we've seen.
Yeah. I mean, really, like, okay, cool, it's like shooting some asteroids or whatever, fine. But, like, you have to keep track of the number, and, like, you have to hit the right numbers back, and then also dodge the ships, and then also shoot the, like, waves, and also the graphics are really cool and new.
Well, that doesn't make a lot of sense to me, again, because, like, you're supposed to knock back the ships. The ships come out with numbers, am I correct?
Not all of them. Some come out without, and you gotta kill.
Yeah.
Some come out with a number, and you gotta
You gotta knock them back in there. So, and the number has to match exactly. Which means that if say you're at like the random number generated was 33, and you knocked back like 5 ships who total 30. So that means the number is at 3 right now. And a ship comes out and it's got the number 4 on it.
So you dodge it.
So you dodge it, but then it gets past you, and that doesn't it start shooting at you?
No, surely it just continues, right? Those I don't think are probably.
Or maybe you can destroy them. I don't know.
Maybe you just destroy them. I don't know.
We don't know.
Yeah.
We know nothing. We could sit here for another hour and talk about plausible
that's a good
ways
point.
this game could run.
That's a good point.
We don't know. And the worst part is, that's the end of the information we have.
Yeah.
Okay.
We've got the internet legend, We've got some details that people seem to repeat, but I can't validate. We've got a story by Roach, which sounds plausible, and I can see credence in bits and pieces of it, but I can't. None of it stitches together, and this is probably the loosest bit of. This is the loosest story we've done yet.
Yeah.
Because it's all over the map.
Yeah, and personally, I find no reason whatsoever to believe Stephen Roach, and also, I think we've gone on long enough. It's time to solve the mystery.
Oh, Joe knows the answer, apparently.
What is the answer, Joe?
Well, it's pretty freaking obvious. Okay, this was a Defense Department experiment to create a video game. And the idea was to create a video game that would cause people to completely spaz, go insane, kill themselves. The idea was that once they had perfected this and tested it, then they would airdrop like millions of these in hostile countries like Iran, North Korea, whatever, and totally decimate their populations. So they put out
busy playing the game.
So they put out a beta version in Portland, and
it failed.
And the only thing they get is one kid who spazzes out and has an epileptic fit, So a major disappointment. So they pulled it and they put them in a huge warehouse somewhere, like the one you see at the end of Raiders of the Lost Ark, where they still are. And that's it. That was the end of the experiment. They decided it was like they just couldn't create a video game that would cause people to spaz out and kill themselves.
Maybe. Yeah. I personally, my personal opinion.
Yeah.
Is that I think that it may have been real, but I don't think it was real in terms of the actual incarnation that we hear about in all the stories. I think that it probably is, this is an amalgamation of several stories, of several games that have been merged together through the mishmash of it.
Sure.
There's enough concrete or solid, believable information here that I'm willing to run with it. I just don't think that Polybius was real.
No,
I think
not.
that it was beta versions of Tempest or Battlezone or any of these other games that are out there, or games that we don't even know of because they just faded from the memory of the social group. Is that I think that it's just a bunch of them stitched together.
That's fair.
I think that, actually, if you were to look for a credible version of the whole thing, it's like if you can imagine some nerd that hung out in game arcades back in those days, and this game shows up, and it's put out in a few places, not just his, and it turns out...
Well, that's a needle in a haystack.
Well, yeah,
Find that guy.
No, but what I mean is, like, so this guy is like witnessing the arrival of this game from nowhere. And it's really popular with him and his dorky friends. And it's like they really like it a lot. But it turns out it's not. It's totally a dead letter in every other arcade they put it in. So a couple of weeks go by, and maybe randomly some kid has an epileptic seizure while he's in the arcade. Then the game gets pulled because it's obviously a failure. Because aside from this guy and his nerdy friends, nobody else likes it or plays it. So they pull it, and that's the end of that. And then this guy, Years later, he's like,
tacks it on to the end of this other legend.
Yeah, it's like, this guy years later says, I can't believe this. This arcade game shows up, and everybody was nuts about it, meaning him and his friends. And then somebody has an epileptic fit, and then they pull the game, and that was it. The whole thing just went down the memory hole. But no, maybe it was just purely a game that sucked, and nobody wanted to play it.
Maybe.
And so they pulled it up.
What do you think?
I honestly don't know what I think.
No?
I do. I think that
You're taking my stance?
Yeah.
My normal stance?
No, yeah, I really am, actually. I think that there's a lot of stuff that's great in this story, and I think there's a lot of stuff that's pure crap in this story. You guys know, and you probably, listeners, now know, based on my, little rants, I'm really passionate about video games. I really like them. And, the fact that there are so many things that I almost want to be true. I just can't decide either way whether it existed or not. And I do think that since we do have the pleasure of living in Portland, maybe we can find a little more about it, but probably not. I think that if that stuff was to be found, it'd be on the internet already. It'd be part of the story.
Maybe.
Because, well, I think this is the thing about internet. People speculate and they cut and paste and make stuff up. But if any of these people are out there that are actually busily obsessing over this topic, they would have done a couple of things. They would have looked for a South American software company that was specialized in video games. They would have gone to the Oregonians' archives. They would have looked in German records, because there's got to be at least one nerd out there in Germany who's following this intensely, who could actually look in public records to see if a company was ever incorporated called Zinnerschlossen. No, and nobody's done this. Yeah, I mean,
it's hard to say.
Yeah,
hard to say.
But
well, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to leave this one unsolved, urban legendish.
Likely to be permanently unsolved.
Maybe permanently. But that having been said, if you'd like to go ahead and check out some of the links for some of the research that we did for the show, you can go ahead and check that out on our website. The website is, of course, thinkingsidewayspodcast.com. You can listen to the show right there on that website. You can also go ahead and listen to the show on iTunes if you want to go ahead and download, and probably most of you that download do it through iTunes. Got a couple of minutes, go ahead and leave us that comment as well, because that's what helps other people find us.
Absolutely.
If you're on the go and you realize that a new show has come out and you forgot to download it, well, of course, you can find us on Stitcher, which is available on just about every internet-capable device. You can stream it right there. You can always go ahead and send us an email. So if you've got thoughts on this particular episode, or stories that we've got on the site, or stories you'd like to hear, any of the above or anything else, go ahead. You can send us an email. Our email address is thinkingsidewayspodcast@gmail.com. And as a matter of fact...
Yeah, we have some listener comments.
Are they good?
Well, it's good. I mean, basically what it is there's this little website called Reddit. And it's tiny. But we actually got a message there from a user. Anyways, he really likes our show. He looped us in with like a bunch of other really awesome podcasts.
Cool.
And also suggested a podcast topic for us.
Oh, really?
Yeah, which we're definitely going to get to. But I just thought we'd give him a little shout out because, I like hearing great things about our show. I don't know about you guys.
Well, I don't care.
No, it's good to know. And you said he gave us a story to look into?
Yeah, the Montauk Project, which is, I think, going to be a lot of research.
Okay, yeah, I've not heard of that one.
Yeah,
So.
it's a conspiracy.
A conspiracy?
Oh, yeah. Right. So Joe might have to take
Joe
this
have
one.
to take that.
I just might have to take that one.
But, so 0-18s, thanks.
Yeah, thanks a lot. We appreciate that.
Seriously,
Appreciate
dude
it.
or dudette, whatever, whichever you are, we appreciate it.
Yeah, I guess I just assumed you were a dude, but you could be a chick.
Totally.
Yeah.
All right.
All right. Well, that having been said, once again, thanks for slogging through this one with us, ladies and gentlemen. I know this. We didn't think this was going to be turned into as big of an episode as it obviously has, but I hope you enjoyed it. And we're going to go ahead and wrap it up.
Yeah.
And we'll come back at you next week with something completely unrelated to today's show and completely interesting. Until then, we'll talk to you later.
Bye.
It was aliens.
Yeah. Chupacabra.
Aliens.
I don't
want to.
Thinking Sideways is not supported by reusing all those AOL discs. Instead, it's supported by the generous donations of our listeners on Patreon. Visit patreon.com/thinkingsideways to learn more. And thanks.
Thinking Sideways.
I don't understand.
Does not compute.
You never know.
Insufficient data to formulate a reply. What?
Stories of things we simply don't know the answer to.
Well, hey there. Welcome to another episode of Thinking Sideways. I'm Joe, joined as always by
Devin?
And
Steve.
Yeah. So we're going to solve a really groovy mystery. And by the way, this is part of our summer series, so in order to free up some of your precious time, we decided to drop a series of episodes that are kind of shorter, because the fact of the matter is there's a ton of mysteries out there, and a lot of them aren't really hour-and-a-half mysteries, unfortunately. So we're going to cover some of those, and then you have more time for barbecues and swilling beer, blowing your fingers off with fireworks, all the usual stuff. So let's get to it.
This is going to be a bang.
Actually, I know that I think the listeners of Thinking Sideways are smarter than the average bear, and I think that probably they're not the demographic that actually do blow their fingers off.
Hopefully.
Yeah,
I'm
not
pretty
usually.
Sure. Yeah.
Well, let's stop talking about the demographic just in case.
Yeah, okay.
We don't want to isolate them.
Yeah. This mystery is it's kind of old. It's over half a century old. It involves a little death, and it's got the usual CIA perfidy in it, so trigger warnings. You guys know what that means. It starts depending on August 16th, 1951, in Pont Saint-Esprit, France. That is, it actually should be pronounced Pont Saint-Esprit, but French are famous for mispronouncing everything.
Yeah, they're pretty bad at pronunciation,
Yeah.
unlike us.
Sorry, French listeners, just kidding. Pont Saint-Esprit is a small village in southern France. As of the 2012 census, population 10,651, but the town was somewhat less than half that size when these strange events began to take place. And by the way, have you guys gone and looked at it on the street view?
No.
Briefly.
Yeah, it looks like a really beautiful, charming little town.
I mean, it's in France, so...
Looks like a nice place to live.
Yeah.
It does. So our story actually begins a little earlier than August 15th because some of the citizens of Pont Saint-Esprit began experiencing heartburn, stomach cramps, fever chills, in some cases vomiting and diarrhea, and most people had their heart rate slowed dangerously down, and some people felt that like their entire digestive tract was on fire. So obviously there had been somebody had ingested something.
I believe that would be the cause.
Yeah, probably. There was intense cramping of hands, feet, and calves in some cases. And the symptoms varied widely, actually, among all various people, but quite a few people were affected. A lot of people were affected with insomnia, so people were not able to sleep for several days. And within 2 days of this beginning, about 250, 300 people started to go insane. And yeah, it must have been really interesting to be living in Pont Saint-Esprit in those days.
What, to be one of the people who is not going insane, surrounded by a bunch of insane people?
Yeah.
And wondering if you're going insane
and
because
wondering
you
if
think
it's gonna
everybody
happen to
else
you
looks
too?
insane?
Yeah. It would be weird.
It seems like it, yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of people still alive who remember that whole thing. Fewer all the time, of course, because it happened in 1951.
God, this sounds that whole being around a bunch of people who are going nuts and worrying if you're next sounds like the plot of so many movies.
Well, it's
It does.
just like the dancing plague.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
I mean, we've and there's the whole laughter sickness thing that we've not done an episode on yet. But
No, we haven't done that one yet.
I mean, I think that's one of those things that's it just messes with your head.
Kind of does. Hope it doesn't happen to me.
Group
but-
psychosis.
Yeah, a
Yeah.
little.
Yeah, there was a recent case where it was an entire, I want to say it was a junior high or a high school, all came down with Tourette's, supposedly, and it was just kind of one of those weird group psychosis things. Very odd.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. Either that or they were-
it'd be weird to be the guy who's like, I'm not yelling, I'm not screaming at anybody, I don't get it, what's going on?
Or am I, and I just don't know it.
There you go. Hmm.
It's entirely possible. Where was I? Time Magazine covered it. They told how people ran through the streets yelling that somebody was trying to get them. People were, according to a person who was interviewed who lived there at the time, people were hitting each other and insulting one another. A small boy supposedly attempted to strangle his mother, although in some tellings of this tale it was his grandmother. And there were delirious people being tied to their beds. People screamed that red flowers were coming out of their bodies.
That's weird.
Yeah, I know. That's
really
a hallucination
weird.
I really don't want to have.
Yeah, absolutely.
Somebody said his head had turned into molten lead. Another person thought his head had turned to copper. And there were reportedly 4 suicide attempts, and there were actually some successful suicides also. One guy claimed this is according to a witness who was interviewed in 2010. He was standing in the window of a building, like 2 or 3 stories up, and was shouting, "Look, I'm a dragonfly!" And
Oh, no.
this is not going to end well,
No.
right? Yeah. Luckily for him, he only broke his legs. He didn't kill himself.
Oh,
But yeah, ouch. Apparently he survived. Another man tried to drown himself because he thought his body was being eaten by snakes. Another guy claimed that he saw his heart escaping through his feet.
Oh,
He went to... Yeah, that would be another unpleasant one.
Right?
Yeah,
this is a serious set of trips.
Yeah, these people are really, really, really tripping here.
Yeah.
Yeah, big time. There's a postman named Leon Amounier who was still alive in 2010 when he was interviewed by the BBC. He said he was doing his route, riding a bicycle, and all of a sudden he became nauseous, and then he started hallucinating. And he said, and I quote, "I had the sensation of shrinking, and the fire and the serpents coiling around my arms," unquote. So that sounds pretty intense.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
It sounds like a Jim Morrison song.
Yeah, it kind of does.
I was just going to say, it sounds a bit like Alice in Wonderland.
Yeah.
You know?
But, what's remarkable about this, and, maybe actually some people were hallucinating. They had pleasant hallucinations. So they were like, like romping through a mountain meadow and, being surrounded by fluffy kittens. But apparently all the ones I'm hearing about are really horrible.
Yeah.
So
I want to have the trip where I'm surrounded by fluffy kittens.
Yeah, me too.
Not the snakes coiling one. No,
I'd rather not have that one. Oh, back to our postman. He was taken to a hospital and put in a straitjacket, and he was put in a room with 3 teenagers who had been chained to their beds. And apparently they spent several days in there. And Leon, the postman, eventually came to his senses, but needless to say, he does not have good memories of this whole thing.
So this was the kind of thing that people would go into and out of, and it wasn't like everybody was crazy at the same time. It was
kind of more like intermittent, I think.
Mm-hmm. And for different people at different times, and it lasted longer for some people than others.
Yeah.
Okay.
Some people recovered fairly quickly. Some people actually didn't hallucinate. They just experienced some of the symptoms, like the feverish kind of feeling and the heartburn and the cramps, but they never got as far as a hallucination thing.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, lucky for them.
Yeah.
But some people really went around the bend. Yeah, in the end, somewhere between 4 and 10 people died. The accounts vary. Most of them that I see say that 7 died, but I've seen but the number might actually be as low as 4. I got that number in a report by the National Institutes of Health that was written 2 weeks after the incident. So this got into the press fairly quickly.
No surprise.
Yeah. Apparently 3 of the 4 were old and in bad health already. And they died of cardiovascular collapse. One was a young, 26-year-old guy in good health, but for whatever reason, he also died of cardiovascular collapse. And that report was written beginning of September 1951. So it's possible there were a few people that died after that. So it's really kind of hazy exactly.
Oh, you mean from lingering effects of whatever they experienced?
Yeah, or suicide or whatever.
Okay.
It's just I'm still not totally sure exactly how many people died. And of course, people die anyway, so
it's hard to
coincidentally died, but not a huge number of people, but still, it's kind of weird. And then 46 people were committed to asylums. I'm not sure how long for. I don't know that anybody had to be permanently committed because of this.
But this was an era where people loved to commit people and just leave them there for a while. So it wasn't
a lot
like
easier back in those days.
Yeah, it wasn't like you just we're going to commit you for some psychiatric help. You'll be there for a couple of weeks, no big deal. It's like, oh no, we're going to commit you. We'll see you in 6 months to a year, Billy.
Yeah, or maybe for the rest of your life. Who knows?
Yeah.
It turns out it's incredibly hard once you've convinced somebody that you are insane to convince them that you aren't insane.
Yeah.
It's real hard.
Well, there's the story of the guy who was trying to get out of some crime, and so he pled insanity and acted nuts and got himself put into a mental facility. And then once he was there, he's like, after a while, he's like, I'm cured. You guys have done a great job.
So we're not sorry, Jimbo.
No, we know better. No, you're not actually better.
Yeah.
Like total backfire.
Yeah.
Yeah. Whoopsie. How did he ever get out?
Gosh, I don't remember. It's been so long since I've read about the story.
Well, definitely. If I were his doctor and say the crime carried a 10-year sentence, I'd probably wait 10 years and say, I guess you're cured after all. See you later.
Bye.
Yeah. Oh, where was I? All in all, about 300 people were affected by this whole thing. And again, the intensity of the attacks and hallucinations varied quite a bit. But some people were permanently damaged and never really led normal